Our next guest, who is a dynamic speaker, and I'm happy for her to be here, and if you encounter her, you will have encountered sunshine. So we are going to introduce you, Clori Close. Cori Close played basketball for UC Santa Barbara and was an assistant coach for 18 years at 3 different universities before taking over as UCLA's women's coach in 2011. But her roots at UCLA run deep and are personal. UCLA was her first stop as an assistant, and it was there she met John Wooden, who became a mentor and confidant for 10 years. So I'm going to quote you. She said, "He used to tell me all the time that when you get tired of growing, then you're just done." Close said, "You have to sharpen the saw, so to speak. I had the best teacher in the book," and I think we all can agree to that Coach Wooden was the most amazing. She says, "I pretty much went back every Thursday night after that and continued to go and spend time with him whenever he'd take me." And so she had 10 wonderful years, and she has a lot to say, and she's learned a lot, and she's going to share it with us. And before I go into all of her credentials, I will allow it to do herself. Let's give her a warm welcome.
Thank you. It really was one of my life's greatest joys to be mentored and to just sit with Coach Wooden. And he was just a lifelong learner. And I was actually talking as I was driving over here this afternoon from my home. I was talking to another coach, and he was saying, it really is about, if we're going to be lifelong learners, it's not only about what we're going to be able to give back, but it re-energizes us, right? To continue to choose to grow is really just about re-energizing us day by day. And Coach Wooden modeled that so well. And when I'm asked to speak or to talk about, especially about leadership, I really try to think, first I start out, okay, what great nuggets could I, think up to share? And you know what it always comes back to? I'm going to tell you what I'm learning as I attempt to be a lifelong learner, imperfectly. But this is what I have been trying to teach myself this year about being a leader. And I know your theme about embracing change and all of those different kinds of things. And, change is hard, isn't it? I was writing something the other day, and I really like comfort zones, I'm okay with those, Status quo sometimes is a really, safe place for me. But not a lot of growing happens there. And so I'm going to share with you about sort of 3 areas I've been trying to grow in this year, and I'm hoping that maybe just even one of those might encourage you. I was listening to a podcast, and this guy on this podcast said, I have a tendency to be pessimistic. And I have a tendency to wake up and go, oh, what could go wrong today? That's my sort of MO. And he said, what changed it for me, though? He started getting up and saying, this is going to be the best day of my life. What would it look like for this to be the best day of my life? And he said, you know what? Many times it was. Many times it turned out to be the best day of his life. And I started thinking to myself, what would it look like this year for me to create the best year of my life? What would that look like if I came up with this every morning with this anticipatory way? I get to work at UCLA. I get to come on this gorgeous campus. I get to work with incredible young people, and I get to be inspired by them every day. What if I had that anticipatory mindset to say, this is going to be the best year of my life? And I defined it. I wrote it down in my journal, the 3 areas that if I could grow in these 3 areas this year, I might be able to create one of the best years of my life. And so I'm just going to share with you sort of what's been going on in my heart. And one of the first thing I wrote down to create some change in my life and to create maybe one of the best years of my life and to help me grow as a servant leader is I needed to learn how to set my mind. Emphasis on the word set. I think sometimes we treat it like we use mindset a lot, but how many of you guys would, if you had a better mindset, you'd have a better attitude, you'd be less worried about what people think, you just would set your mind on the right things. But I don't know about you, but for me, a lot of times it used to be mind hope or mind maybe. Not necessarily mindset. There's an action involved there, right? And I think I gave lip service to that, but I'm not sure I really lived that. I tell my players all the time, and coaching is this incredible sense of accountability. Because I'll say to my players, have you set your mind, we practice in the morning, and I'll say, have you set your mind to give and grow today? Those are the two things I ask of them every day in practice. And there'll be sometimes at 8:30 in the morning where I'll say, have you set your mind today? And I was like, oh crap, I haven't set mine. But the thing is if we don't set our mind, we tend to be self-absorbed, a little bit numb, okay? And, I think that all of us left to our own devices, if we don't set our mind, all of the noise tells us either we're not good enough or we're going through the motions. Bottom line is, not to decide is to decide. And we got a lot of influences that will decide for us if we don't choose to set our minds. What does social media tell us? Tells me I'm not cute enough, smart enough, thin enough, good in coaching enough. I actually had this year in the Pac-12 tournament, we lost in overtime. And I got a technical foul. We lost in overtime. It was very charged, and our team was devastated. And I walked into the media room afterwards, and I got up on the stage for the press conference, and Japrice Dean and Kennedy Burke were right there, and they sat down, and they just put their head in their hands, and they just started to cry. Look at me, I can get choked up again. And I got up there and just started to cry. And this is being filmed, live TV, and recorded and played back over social media. And it was interesting. If I had listened, if I had not set my mind about what I was committed to and what my job is for those young women, the comments that surrounded that press conference were not very favorable. You lost the game for them. All kinds of, what a wimp, who stands up there and cries, all kinds of interesting things. Our culture says a lot of things, and I'm a huge believer that if we don't set our minds, we will get upset by the outside noise. Our players all the time, I say to them, if you don't set your mind, how's it working out for you? How's it working out for you letting your likes, and I don't know, maybe you guys are above it, but I guess I'm in that world all the time, and I'm just as bad as them. I look, if I post something, I want to see how much attention it got. But again, we have to learn to set our minds, or someone else will set it for us. Every morning I get up and I sit with 7 minutes of silence. Nothing. And believe me, I'm tempted. I put my phone and I press start on my stopwatch, and it's hard to sit there in 7 minutes of silence. And then I say out loud 10 things that I'm thankful for that day. For me, that has really helped me to be still, to think about, just to let my mind wander, and then to say out loud 10 things that I'm really grateful for. That's part of my routine, to set my mind. Do you know how many days? I've heard the wrong thing. And as a professor on this campus, and I should know, but I always said it took how many days to create a new habit? Anyone? 21. You know what it really is? 63. Darn it. 63 days, and I've been trying to make sure that I'm put my phone down, 30 minutes, no phones, no screens, 30 minutes before I go to bed, 30 minutes at the beginning of the day. And it is hard to go 63 days to create a new habit, but it's part of me setting my mind. Another friend of mine said they were going to not have their phone out for a whole year when they walked through an airport. And as they walked through the airport, their phone was going to be in their bag, and they were going to count every time how many people they could make smile. Well, that's pretty cool. But they said it really wasn't about the other people. It was for me to get my head up, and to set my mind that I was here to give to others, not to receive. I thought that was pretty good. You know, it's interesting, when I was in high school, I don't know why I was speaking at the graduation. After this, you'll wonder too, why was she speaking back then? I don't know. But I wasn't valedictorian. I really don't even remember how I got to do this. But it was interesting. My mom and I were sitting in the dining room thinking about what was I going to say. And it's interesting about what she sort of helped me articulate. But my high school graduation speech was, are we going to choose to be givers or takers? It's so interesting. I'm 47 years old now, and that's still my daily choice when I set my mind. I want to choose to be a giver rather than a taker. You know, it's interesting. There's a lot of things that can get in the way of our mindset. The leading triathlon, do you know anyone who's done a double Ironman or Ironwoman triathlon? Anyone know anyone who's done a double? Man, bless their little hearts. Unbelievable. The person who's done the most, my friend John Gordon, asked him, what is it? What's the key? How do you have the strength to do double Ironman triathlons? And you know what he said? I've learned the art of talking to myself rather than listening to myself. Think about that. Because if I'm just listening to myself, I'm saying, I'm tired. Why am I doing this? There's many times. And our players, we talk about this a lot. And if you were to ask our players about mindset, they would say one of the biggest skills they have taken away from being a college athlete is the art of being able to talk to themselves, replace those doubts, fears, frustrations, distractions with truth by talking to themselves rather than listening to themselves. Mindset. Gandhi had a great phrase, because, you know, we all start out, I start my day pretty consistently with my little routine that I sort of shared part of it with you. And do you think I've ever had a perfect day with my mindset? No. It's a fight throughout the whole day to reset, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But Gandhi said, I will not let anyone walk through my mind with their dirty feet. That's deep, right? I will not let anybody walk through my mind with their dirty feet, because I'm going to set my mind on the things that I want to focus on. Because if I do that, I'm going to create one of the best years of my life. One of my players said to me, they're so wise, and they teach me way more than I teach them. They said, just because you have a thought doesn't mean you have to believe it. Oh, you're right. My hope is that you and I will both choose to set our minds each day on positive truths. No dirty feet or lies allowed. The next thing I've been really trying to work on this year to create the best year of my life and to embrace the change in my life is to, I call it grand grit. Embracing the hard. How many of you have heard of Grit? Pretty famous book, right? In university circles. Grit. Passion and perseverance over a long period of time in spite of our circumstances. Grit. In fact, the hard part about this, remember I said I really like my comfort zone? How many people have gained the most growth or grit in their life drinking a Mai Tai in the Bahamas? Nobody, right? I ask that all the time in home visits. I just got done from traveling a ton. When we weren't playing in the NCAA tournament, we were traveling across the country doing home visits because of where the NCAA calendar goes. And so I'm going in with these families, and I try to ask them, because every parent thinks they're going to be an All-American, they're never going to have a bad day, and I'm just going to make them the most incredible basketball player that never has a tear that's shed. And they start and play every minute of every game. But I asked them all in front of their parents to tell me about a time they grew the most. And I've said, you have to pick some. Just tell me a time that you're really proud of something you conquered. And every time, I keep hoping someone's going to say, sitting by the pool. But it has not happened yet, and I've been coaching 26 years. But every one of them talks about a hard thing they've had to overcome. Something they've had to face. Some hard circumstances they had to choose to embrace that created the most grit, the most growth in their life. I remember Jordan Canada. She was the 5th pick in the WNBA draft last year. She graduated for us, and she won a WNBA championship last year as a rookie. I'm like, oh, it's all downhill for you from there. But I remember sitting with her before her senior year, and she said, Coach, I really want to be a first-round draft pick. I said, really? I said, are you willing to embrace the hard? Every WNBA coach that comes and watches you, well, they say, she knows how to do the hard things. And so she made a list of 5 things that she was going to do the entire year to embrace the hard. She did every one. One of them was, if we're running a sprint, and this is the end line right here, and we time everything, she would go past the end line to go back, and she would take a ball every time. And she still had to make the time. Every WNBA coach that came to scout her or watch her, they were like, whoa, why does she go to the end of that line? She knows how to embrace the hard. Every single time. And she would say, I have to high-five 5 teammates in between every drill. She had a tendency to get really down on herself, so she wouldn't go outward. But every time she disciplined herself, that was hard for her. So she would go high-five in between every drill. I bet you every time a coach came and watched her, her draft stock went up because they all commented she knew how to embrace the hard. And she grew so much. She felt great about herself. She grew a ton. Her teammates respected her more, and her productivity rose. You know, it's interesting, another thing that we tell our players all the time, and I love that you're doing this conference, and in leadership, we tend to want to think about our impact all the time, but I always say that nothing will happen through us until it happens in us. And so if I want our team to reflect, to embrace the hard, to have that grand grit, then I have to model that. Because I don't only want to have things happen through me, but I want it to happen in me first. We have a guy, director of mental training, and he brought our team out into the center court of Poly Pavilion, and he says, it was about 6 years ago, and he walked him out on the court, and it was like dim lighting, and you know, we got incredible history, right, in that building. And he says, what are the 2 things that are going to be with you the rest of your life from this experience? And he was talking to them about 4 to 5 years. But you know what? It's just like it is for our lives. And the first thing out of one of our players is, I want a banner. Raise me a banner. Women's basketball doesn't have a banner, a national championship banner in this building. And he says, banners hang in buildings. Someone else, Kelly Hayes, said, I want the natty. Give me the ring. He says, rings collect dust. The only 2 things that are going to stay with you for the rest of your life from this experience, who you become and who you impact. Who have you become the last 24 hours? I don't know, was this all day or yesterday too? Just today. Okay. 8 hours, you know. But who have you become, and then who will you impact? Because that will be the only thing that lasts forever from this experience. So when I talk to our players about who they want to become, one of the central parts about that is they've got to feel really good that they know how to develop grit in their lives. They know how to, because in that book, I love that book, Grit, by the way, and it talks about how that is the biggest indicator of success for students and young students, and especially under-resourced students. It is not how the status of their school, how it was rated. It was the grit in their life. The perseverance, the passion and perseverance over a long period of time despite their circumstances. And I will tell you that has been a weakness of mine. So if I want to model for our players, and I know that that's probably the biggest indicator of success and growth in their life is to embrace the hard, so develop grit, I better let it go in me so it can then go through me. If you're going to grow and change for the better this year, there really is no choice. if you want to experience, I always tell our place, hey, no, don't worry about it. If you want to experience minimal growth, live a self-centered life, numb to most of the way through, hey, relax, tune me out, do nothing. That's exactly what you'll get. If you want to grow, experience greater joy, and be different from the inside out this year, you have to embrace the hard. Well, that's a real downer, isn't it? But honestly, how do we feel, right? How do we feel if we embrace change? How do we feel when we've had a day where we've had to face something and conquer something, and maybe we had a hard conversation with a colleague, or maybe we learned something that we didn't know earlier and it was difficult? The more difficult the challenge, the deeper the fulfillment. And I think we've been duped, y'all. I think we've been duped to think that the easy, quick way is better. I know I have. Too often. But if I don't set my mind and embrace the hard, shallow follows. Shallow living follows. If I want fulfillment and growth and impact on the people around me, I always say I've got to be the best impactor of my 20 square feet around me. I've got to set my mind. I've got to do the hard things. The last one for me that I've been sort of struggling with through, and it's interesting to me. Do you know that the number one killer in the world, it's not cancer, it's not heart disease, it's lack of love. Isn't that crazy? Lack of love. I'll tell you a story about this in a second from a trip I took to South Africa, but with a team. But South African greeting is Sawubona. It means I see you. We start out film in our practices every day. In the first 4 minutes, we watch highlights of our games. So that each individual person has an individual highlight. So we set our minds on what we want to see more of. And so they watch their individual highlight films every single day to start out film. And the next thing we do is we stand up and say, Sawubona, to 4 of our teammates, and then we sit down and get ready to do the next thing. I see you. I'm here with you and for you. I see you. Sawubona. Because the third thing that I want to do to create the best year of my life is I want to learn, and I do not do this well, but I want to learn to love radically. I want to learn to love radically. Because I think my human instincts and probably my self-protective instincts is probably just to play it safe. And to stay in control and be the leader, try to have the right things to say, work my plan. But I think when I was really thinking about how do I create the best year of my life, how do I become the best servant leader I can possibly be, it hit me like a ton of bricks that I needed to learn to love radically. It's so funny, I talked to, next year, and this is not by choice, but it just has ended up this way. Next year we will have more people on our team from out of state than we have in state. We actually will have more people on our team from Texas than California. It's crazy. And it just cyclically goes that way because we don't spend near as much time there. But guess what? The very first thing they want to tell me about, they ask me, "What have you ever seen the TV show?" And they ask me, then it filled in the blank. Anyone can guess what it is? What's right next door? Will Smith, Old School, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Every time. Coach, do you know where the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air house is? Have you ever seen that show? That is the number one question from these out-of-staters. Not, what's it like to be at the number one public institution in the country? Not, have you ever seen the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? It's interesting, though, because I have a really good friend of mine who's a great Bruin, lives in Bel Air and has been wildly successful financially. And he said to me, Cori, I've never had this many influential friends and people with a lot of resources, and I've never known as many people that don't know how to love well. That really hit me. Really hit me. We were in the Virgin Islands this year. Coaching's really hard, a lot of sacrifice. I had to take a team to the Virgin Islands. But honestly, we do a shoe distribution there, and we try to do this at a remote location and at an under-resourced school in LA every year. And we take recycling money, and I'm going to tell you in a second what the other recycling money goes to, but we take bottles and cans. We collect them from Poly, and other sports help us, and donors bring them. We take this recycling bottles and cans, and then we pay for these shoes. And we brought 192 pairs of shoes over to the Virgin Islands, and we had elementary school that was decimated by Hurricane Irma. And we got to go and wash 192 kids' feet and put 192 pairs of socks and shoes on these kids. And the first thing people ask is it a religious thing? It's not a religious thing, it's a humility thing. We don't come and drop off shoes to them. We kneel down, we look at them right in the eye, and we bring honor and care and love to them the best we know how. And we provide for a need. But in the back of this time really hit me. Still, they have not been able to rebuild their city. And there was a 6-story apartment building, and the back was still completely blown off. We're talking 6-story, no walls. I'm looking right into people's living rooms and bedrooms, and that's where they still lived. And little Sophia comes up to my station, and she sits down there, and she says, "This is my very first pair of new shoes." And she says, "I have 7 older siblings, and I've only had hand-me-downs my whole life. This is my first pair of new shoes." And she says, "I feel loved." Ah, tears. But you know, when you can do this, and I do not deserve the credit for this, Pam Walker in our office and our team and all these people, I got to enjoy it. But isn't that what happens when we love radically? And I don't care when we say, it sounds really touchy-feely. But you know what? My staff works a whole lot harder for me when I love them well. My team is willing to fight in the trenches to grow more when I love well. And guess what? It changes my heart. Who won in that day, Sophia or me? Me. Hopefully Sophia won because she got a new pair of shoes and she felt loved. But my heart got changed. My heart got changed. When we learn to love radically and to give our lives away, oh man, I win. We win. I'm reading this book called Everybody Always. And in the book, he says, it's really, we make it harder than it needs to be. He said, just be awesome for someone each day. Be awesome for someone else each day. I was like, okay. He tells this great story in the book. His neighbor had developed cancer, and he told her to develop a bucket list. And he'd come alongside her, and she started to feel really lonely, so he went to Radio Shack, and he got these walkie-talkies, and was right next door, and she could say to him, middle of the night, whatever, are you there, Bob? And one of the things on her bucket list, she goes, Bob, I want to go, and this is in the middle of the day now, I want to go TPing. I've never TP'd a house before. And he said, well, it's sort of illegal, and we usually do it at night. And it's in the middle of the day. And he said, you're a foreign dignitary, and I have cancer. I think we'll be okay. And so they did it. And the cops came. And sure enough, he said, I'm a foreign diplomat, and she's got cancer, and it's on her bucket list. We're doing this. And then they helped. How cool. How cool was that Bob got to go with his neighbor that's really struggling and love her that way? And it looks different for everybody, but he was being awesome for one person that day. What if you made 5 people intentionally smile today? Each day. What if you forgave someone that undermined your leadership, that was being catty with you at work? Who would win? You win. Coach Wooden had this picture, and I don't know what in his life had happened that it was reminding him of this, but I went over to his apartment one time, and he had this picture of these parents leaning over this 10-year-old little boy, and they were comforting him, and you could tell it was intense. I said, Coach, what is that picture? And he said, that is 2 parents comforting the little boy who just accidentally shot and killed their son. And under the picture it said, forgiveness is freedom. Ooh. And I don't know what Coach Wooden was trying to be reminded of that day and why he had that up on his refrigerator. But, man, unforgiveness is like drinking poison yourself. But it's radical to forgive somebody else that maybe doesn't deserve it. But who wins? I would argue you. When I was coaching at UC Santa Barbara, I lived with a family for 8 years. And I just loved them. And they had his little boy, when I moved in with them, he was 10. And he was 10. And we had this game. I would come home, and I rented a room off to the side of their house. And he would come in, and he'd have the gloves with baseball in his hands. And he's like, let's go play our game. And this is good. My players wish they had those cards to tell me how much time I had left. They really wish I had that. So thank you for that. But Andrew and I would go and play this baseball game over and over again. And man, I loved him so much. And he had volleyball scholarship to Stanford and graduated from San Marcos High School. And I then had moved to Florida State many years later, and I got one of the most devastating calls that he had committed suicide. And it just rocked my world. And there's no formula for that. There's just no formula to know how to do that, how to love people well. I don't know what to say. But it's interesting, his dad, Norm, said something, and he said, I don't expect people to know what to say. In order for people to love me, I don't know what to say. How can I expect someone else to know what to say? But he said, to love us well right now, just show up. I don't care if you don't even want to come in the house. You can sit on the doorstep, just show up. I just need you to show up. Sometimes loving people well and embracing change, and I know this may not seem like with the rest of your speakers, I believe in business, this makes the difference. I believe in families, this makes the difference. I believe in meaningful relationships, it makes the difference. But sometimes loving radically is just showing up. It's not just, it is showing up. You know Coach Wooden's quote, right? In order to have a perfect day, you have to give something to someone else without any expectation of anything in return. That's a perfect day, defined by Coach Wooden. I'll give you 2 stories and I'll close it up. When I went to South Africa, like I said, I was coaching at Florida State at the time, and we went to it was a really interesting dynamic. We stayed at 5-star hotels, and we did these amazing touristy things, and went to Sun City, which is one of the biggest resorts in South Africa outside of Johannesburg. And then outside of Cape Town, they have these townships. So here we are staying in this 5-star hotel, but there's these townships that are really sheds with dirt floors and 30,000 people in these sheds, and most of them had never left the township. And we went in and spent the day in this township and then did a clinic there. And we hiked down to this basketball court, and I was doing a station with Chastity Clayton, and her and I were in an area and there was glass. And many of the kids didn't have shoes, and so they were running around. And so we stopped, and we were pushing the glass. And the kids said, stop! And I'm like, there's glass. You don't have shoes? And they said, no, the glass is here all the time. We need you to love us and teach us. That we don't have any more time for. Don't waste your time on the glass. We know how to deal with that every day. They want to be loved. People, I don't care, anyone and everywhere, I do. I want to be loved radically. I remember them coming to our game. There was the first time we put them on our bus, and most of the kids had never left the township, and they came to our game. And after our game, our players just started taking off their uniforms and just giving them their gear and just wanting to love on those kids. But who won? Hopefully both, but again, my players' hearts, my hearts, we were changed. What would it look like for you to love more radically this year? Even if it wasn't reciprocated, you still win. Now, I will tell you this, that, like I said before, this is my struggle. This is not my victory. This is what I know that as I struggle through, this would create a great year of growth for me. And I don't know about you, I'm trying to lose some weight right now, and sometimes it's like, oh, I had one chocolate chip cookie, I might as well have 12. I already broke the diet, right? So I will tell you, I hope that maybe you'll think about what would it look like for you to create the most radical, embracing the hard, grand grit and mindset year of your life. But what would your things be? My thing is this. One of the people who works with our team says, quit trying to say, focus. None of us can focus for a whole practice in my world. Refocus. Don't throw up your hands and go, I had one cookie, I might as well have 12. Refocus. Refocus. Reset. Reset your mind. See, performance, and in this case for me, my performance is living in these three areas consistently, more consistently every day. Performance equals potential minus interferences. Interferences are going to come. Doubts are going to come. Fears are going to come. Frustrations at work are going to come. Obstacles are going to come. Family life comes. Life comes. Refocus. Reset. E plus R equals O. Event plus response equals outcome. Some of us have had some really hard E's in our lives. Some of you probably have some really hard E's events happening right now. You cannot do anything about your E's. But to the extent that you get the outcome you want will be to the extent you live out a positive R. And you're never going to have a perfect day of doing these things. Refocus. So what? Get better. That's what we tell our team all the time. So what? Get better. I had one chocolate chip cookie. So what? Get better. Refocus. Remember what you forgot. I think we all think of us, why am I forgetting? I know better. Why am I still this way at work? I wanted to be better. I'm at this conference because I can't conquer this. No, remember what you forgot. We all forget. Sometimes I think we beat ourselves up and we don't experience more exponential growth because we're so busy beating ourselves up because we forgot. You're going to forget. I forget. Remember what you forgot. No one ever asked us to never forget. We're asked to discipline ourselves to continually remember. Big difference. Just remind yourself and reset. I'm going to leave you with this story, and then I got to sit down. I was supposed to leave time for questions, and I didn't. It's up to the leader, so. It's so interesting. I'm so grateful to be at a university like this that supports athletics being an extension of the educational experience, the elite educational experience here at UCLA. I was on my fourth day on the job. I walk into my office, and remember, I was mentored by Coach Wooden for a long time. I'd met a lot of his alums. And they said, hey, the Dribble for the Cure guy is here to see you. His name is John Valley. And I was like, oh, he played for Coach Wooden. I was like, I never heard of him. I didn't know him. I'd never met him. And I'm overwhelmed. I haven't hired a staff. And he comes in, and he sits across from me, and he says, he doesn't even really, no pleasantries. He says, I've been married 38 years because of what Coach Wooden taught me. I've started 3 successful businesses because of what Coach Wooden taught me. I've conquered cancer 3 times because of the strength Coach Wooden gave me. Then he really got me. I survived the death of my 12-year-old daughter because of the way Coach Wooden loved me. And pretty much gave me a few details about Dribble for the Cure and left. And I run over to my computer, and I'm looking him up. And you know what? He didn't even mention that he was a starting guard on 2 of Coach Wooden's national championship teams, and he played 7 years in the NBA. Because it paled in comparison to the man he became. See, and to this day, we're now good friends. And to this day, he looks at life as, what am I going to get to experience today? How am I going to create the best year of my life? How am I going to turn a really painful E in losing my daughter, Erin, and use my R to create a really powerful O? And he lives that way. And that became the mission of our program, is to have as many people that go through our educational process using athletics as an extension of their academic development, to have as many people talk about their experience like John Valley did. And it's not about me, it's about the total experience. But remember, the only things that stay with you from this conference, from this day, from this month, from this year, is who you become and who you impact. That's what he was telling me. So for me this year, to struggle through change and growth, it's to learn to set my mind over and over again. Set, reset, do it again, remember what I forgot. to embrace the hard, because I would really prefer a glass of red wine on the beach, and to love more radically this year. And I am a work in progress, y'all, but on the days that I live that well, my heart is full. And I always tell our staff, you can't give away what you don't have. So if we don't fill our hearts with that kind of growth, we're not going to have anything to give away. So that's my journey. And but I always say I really should be sitting down there listening to myself and trying to internalize my own advice because I need it the most. But I just am thankful that you guys would have me to share with you. Thank you for caring about your development. Thank you for caring about growth. Thank you for being the arm and just the depth of elite in this place, and for always being willing to be lifelong learners. You are an example to me. So thank you, everybody.
Give it up. Thank you. Do we have any questions for Coach? Any questions? Back here, you're going to have to walk up here.
I can't believe you let me. I got you. I got this.
Thank you so much, Coach. That was fab. You get the opportunity to work with a lot of people that are very self-motivated. What is your strategy for dealing with times when maybe motivation is low?
Oh, great question. Motivation, and what about someone who's not as motivated? I think knowing relationships, how are they wired? Best motivational coaching book I've ever read is The 5 Love Languages. I know you're like, this lady's a fruitcake. But honestly, I'm words of affirmation and touch, which are 2 of the 5, and I tend to want to do that. But like my point guard is, she is somebody who wants quality time. And actually 9 out of 15 of our players' primary love language is quality time. I'm like, crap, that is a lot of lunches. That does not fill my cup. But first thing to answer that is you got to know how they are wired and what brings meaning for them and try to meet them where they are. I think the other thing is trying to bring it back. What do you want out of this experience? A lot of times, and what is it? Why are you here and what do you want? And then you keep bringing them back to the standards that they set. Most of them will not have the guts to go, just skating through. So as soon as you can get them to say, well, I want to get this promotion, or I want to be better at this skill, well, then that's your reference point. Okay, you told me this. Has that changed? Because unless that's changed, that's the standard that I'm holding them to. And then I would say know how they feel cared for and pushed to grow, and know how they internalize that, not how it comes most easily for you. Any other? Do I have time for any others? We'll take one more. It's Friday afternoon.
Thank you.